Hello, hope things are going well. I wanted to touch on a few things that I've been actually wanting to for a while. One of them is the Acts of the Apostles. That's what we're reading now. It's the first book after the Gospels. It's written by Luke. In fact, we oftentimes think of Paul as writing so much of the Bible, but actually the greatest volume is by the author Luke, who writes both the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles. So I wanted to talk about that, and then there was a question that was asked too, that I thought, let's answer that one at the same time, or at least as we get into the Acts. It says, what is the difference between the apostles and the disciples? It's a great question. There was 12 men that Jesus had called the apostles. We sometimes refer to them as apostles with a capital A, because apostle means one to be sent. In other words, Jesus gathered people around him to be able to send them. That was his mission, that he gathered these people as he brought them into his life, as they came to know him. Then they were sent out so they could bring others to know him, so that one day the whole world would know him. And so these 12 men were called the apostles with a capital A, who had this leadership and very huge role in this. A disciple is somebody who followed Jesus. And so Jesus, he had many people who listened to him. And he oftentimes, you hear this distinction made in the Gospels. There was the crowds and the disciples. So the crowds were just people who were interested and paid attention, like, who is this guy? And they listened to him. But the disciples were the people who actually followed him. Actually put into action the words that he spoke. And so his disciples then are people who follow him. And in many senses, his disciples are his apostles with a small a, because he also sent his disciples out, because everybody who's a Christian has this call to truly share this beautiful news, this beautiful gift that we have received with others. So in the Acts of the Apostles, we learn a lot about the activity of the apostles with the capital A, and as well as the disciples, and how that all worked. We could start today thinking about the Acts of the Apostles with Saint James. Saint James the Elder. There's actually two Saint James. I want to speak about the greater, not the elder, I guess the greater is what he's oftentimes referred to as. And he, it tells us in Acts of the Apostles, suffered a martyr's death. So let me read this from the Acts of the Apostles. And it's taken from chapter 12. About that time, King Herod laid hands upon some of the members of the church to harm them. He had James, the brother of John, killed by the sword. So in other words, remember James and John, the two brothers? James was killed. But there's a tradition that St. James actually went to Spain, of all places. Talk about an apostle being sent. That he went to Spain, to the other end of Spain, to proclaim the gospel. And there's a town called Santiago de Compostela. Actually, that's the church that I'm standing in front of right now. That he went there to proclaim the gospel, and the very town is like Santiago St. James in Spanish, and then Compostela means like his body, so the body of St. James. So his head remains in Jerusalem, but his body was evidently transferred there. There's a very famous camino or way or road that leads there. Many people throughout the Middle Ages and even today take this trek, this pilgrimage. I had an opportunity to take part of it as well. Maybe in a future section we could talk more about that. But anyway, at this church is the body of St. James. People come to just honor that, the relics of a saint. There's also something else that's cool about this, is that with all these pilgrims coming, I think this is probably the origin. They decided to make this huge incenser, so it's like just massive, meaning remember that's this thing that blows out smoke. We sometimes use the silver metal device that we put smoke in. They have one that's just huge that flies across the whole sanctuary, back and forth, probably to get rid of the smells that would have emanated from the people who were there. So anyway, that's St. James, and it tells us a little bit about the Acts of the Apostles and what happened to things after Jesus left. One more quick note. I've received comments, or not comments, but just kind of people responding after they receive different messages, either by email or text message, of people who say that they're me asking for certain things, usually asking for gift cards. Please ignore all of those things. If I really need something like that, I'm very likely just going to call you. I won't text you or email you, but there seems to be these different waves of these scams that go around, oftentimes using my name. So please just ignore them. Sorry for being impersonated, I guess. Anyway, have a beautiful, wonderful day.